You hear them at night, that faint scratching inside the wall right above your bed, the one that makes your stomach drop because you know exactly what it is. You set the traps. You called the exterminator. You spent $400 last spring and they came back by October. Tonight, I am going to show you why nothing you bought at the hardware store has ever worked, and why a $2 piece of metal, the same one Amish farmers have been using since the 1870s, will end the problem permanently. I learned this the hard way, after years of paying men in white trucks to do a job my grandfather would have laughed at. The first time I saw it was in a root cellar outside Mount Hope, Ohio, on a January morning so cold the latch on the door had frozen shut. An old Amish man named Eli Hostetler pointed at the corner where the stone met the floor joist. He said, "We have not had a rat in this house in 51 years, and then he showed me the thing. I am going to tell you what it was, where to get it, and how to install it this weekend without a single permit, a single contractor, or a single phone call to anyone. Stay with me, because the real secret is buried in a USDA bulletin from 1908 that nobody talks about anymore. Here is what nobody at the hardware store will ever tell you. Rats do not enter your house through the front door. They do not crawl up the foundation looking for a crack. They follow the same 3 pathways every single time, and those pathways have not changed in 200 years. The first is the gap where your sill plate meets the foundation. The second is the penetration where pipes and wires come through the wall. The third, and this is the one that gets 90% of older homes, is the soffit return at the roof line where your attic vents meet the eave. A rat can squeeze through a hole the size of a quarter. A mouse needs only a dime. And every house built before 1980 has dozens of these openings, most of them invisible from inside the wall. I spent 40 years thinking the solution was poison. I bought every brand, I read every label, I paid a pest company in Lancaster County $200 every quarter for almost a decade. The rats kept coming. Then one afternoon I was sitting on a porch in Holmes County with a farmer named Amos, and he asked me a question I have never forgotten. He said, "Why are you trying to kill them when you can just stop them from coming in?" He said it the way you would explain something to a child. Not unkind, just patient. And it changed everything. The Amish do not poison rats. They do not set traps in the wall. They do not hire exterminators. They do something so simple, so cheap, so obvious that the pest control industry has spent the last 60 years pretending it does not exist. They use a material called hardware cloth, specifically quarter-inch galvanized hardware cloth, the kind you can buy in a roll at any farm supply store for about $2 a square foot. But the trick is not the material. The trick is where they put it and how they cut it, and the one folded detail that turns it from a screen into a permanent barrier. I want you to understand something about this material before we go further. Hardware cloth was first manufactured in Pittsburgh in 1844. It was used to screen coal from waste rock in the early mines. By the 1870s, German and Swiss immigrant farmers in Pennsylvania were buying it by the bolt and using it to seal every penetration in their barns and houses. There is a USDA Farmers Bulletin, number 369, published in 1909, that recommends quarter-inch galvanized mesh as the only permanent solution for rodent exclusion in rural dwellings. The bulletin specifically warns against poisons, calling them, and I am quoting now, a temporary and dangerous expedient. That bulletin was quietly pulled from circulation in the 1950s, right around the time the commercial pest control industry was lobbying for state licensing requirements. Now think about that for a second. The federal government published a document telling farmers exactly how to solve this problem forever, for almost nothing, and then that document disappeared from common reference. About the same time, companies started charging $200 a visit to do the opposite of what worked. Here is how you actually do it. You walk around the outside of your house with a flashlight, even in the middle of the day, and you look for every single penetration, every pipe, every wire, every dryer vent, every gap under the siding. You measure them, then you take your roll of quarter-inch hardware cloth and you cut a piece at least 2 inches larger than the opening on every side. You fold the edges back on themselves so there is no sharp wire exposed. This is the part the YouTube tutorials always skip. The fold doubles the mesh at the edge and prevents rats from working a single wire loose with their teeth over time. A rat can chew through a single layer of quarter-inch wire if it has months to work on it. It cannot chew through a folded double layer. Penn State Extension confirmed this in a 2014 study on rodent exclusion in dairy operations. The folded edge increased barrier life from approximately 3 years to over 20. You secure the patch with galvanized fence staples or stainless steel screws and washers. You do not use caulk alone. You do not use steel wool because steel wool rusts in 6 months and falls out. You do not use spray foam because rats chew through it like cotton candy. You use the mesh, folded, fastened to wood or masonry, and you walk away. That patch will outlive you. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. The single most important location in an existing home, the one place that accounts for more rat entries than every other spot combined, is the area where your foundation meets your sill plate. In most homes built before 1980, there is a gap there. Sometimes it is hidden behind siding, sometimes it is covered with a thin strip of metal flashing that has long since pulled away. You do not need to tear anything apart to fix it. You walk along the base of your house, you find the gap, and you push a folded strip of quarter-inch hardware cloth into it, then you cap it with a bead of polyurethane sealant. That is it. $20 in materials, one afternoon, and the highway that rats have been using to enter your walls for 40 years is closed permanently. The second location, and this one shocked me when I learned it, is your dryer vent. Almost every dryer vent in America has a plastic flapper that is supposed to keep critters out. That flapper fails within 2 years. Rats know this. They climb up the outside of your house, push the flapper open, and walk right into your laundry room wall. The fix is a $6 metal dryer vent cover with a built-in quarter-inch screen, available at any hardware store. You unscrew the old one, you screw in the new one, 5 minutes. The third location is your roof, specifically the soffit return and the gable vents. This is where roof rats, the climbing kind, get in. You will need a ladder for this one, and if you are not comfortable on a ladder, have a neighbor help you. You staple hardware cloth on the inside of every gable vent and behind every soffit opening. The vent still breathes, the rat cannot pass. Now, what I just walked you through is one technique from a much larger body of work. The same Amish families who showed me this metal trick keep entire systems for everything: the heating in January, the cool root cellars in August, the pantry that lasts 12 months without electricity, the pest control without a single chemical. I gathered the rest of that buried archive into a 3-volume set called The Complete Field Vault, and there is a special limited time offer on it right now, linked in the description below, with a QR code on your screen if you are watching on the television. Take a look if you want the rest of what was taken from us. Now, back to the part that almost nobody knows, because here is the thing. Even after you seal every entry point, you will still hear scratching for about 2 weeks. The rats already inside your walls cannot get out. This is where most people panic and call the exterminator anyway, undoing everything they just did. Do not do that. The Amish solution for the rats already inside is the cheapest part of the whole method, and it is what Eli Hostetler showed me that January morning in Mount Hope. He took me to the corner of the cellar where the stone foundation met an oak floor joist. There was a small wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, mounted to the joist with 2 screws. He opened it. Inside was a piece of hardware cloth bent into a one-way funnel, narrow on the inside, wide on the outside. He had cut a 1/2-inch hole in the wall behind the box. Any rat trapped in the wall could squeeze through the funnel and out into the cellar. They could not get back in. From the cellar, they had to cross open floor to find food, and they almost always left the building entirely within 48 hours. He called it a one-way door. His grandfather had built the first one in 1908, the same year that USDA Bulletin came out. He said the design came from a man named Joseph Beiler, an Amish carpenter near Strasburg, Pennsylvania, who figured out that you do not need to kill the rat. You just need to give it a way out and then close it behind them. The original design was published in a small pamphlet sold at agricultural fairs in eastern Pennsylvania between 1908 and 1922. After that, the pamphlet disappeared. Beiler died in 1931. His grandson kept building the boxes for neighbors. That is how the knowledge survived. You can build one of these in 20 minutes with scrap wood and a 6-inch square of hardware cloth. You cut a triangle of mesh, roll it into a cone with a narrow end about 3/4 of an inch across, staple it inside a small wooden box, and mount the box over a hole in your wall in the basement or crawl space. The rats inside the wall find the funnel because they follow drafts and faint light. They squeeze through. They cannot reverse. Within 2 or 3 nights, your walls go silent, permanently. Because every entry point outside is already sealed with your hardware cloth patches, and the only rats left in the house are the ones now wandering the cellar floor, and those leave on their own because there is nothing to eat. Eli told me he had not had a single rat inside his walls in 51 years. His father had not had one in the 40 years before that. The total cost of materials across 2 generations was less than $30. You just took back something that was quietly stolen from you. 1 cheap roll of metal mesh and a small wooden box that your great-grandfather would have built without thinking twice. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been pushed aside so that someone else could keep sending you a bill every quarter, you already know what to do with what I just told you. Build the one-way door this weekend. Then come back here and tell me in the comments where you found your biggest entry point, the sill plate, the dryer vent, or the gable. I read every single one and I want to know what your house was hiding. Hit subscribe if you want to be part of a quiet movement of people putting this knowledge back where it belongs, inside ordinary homes owned by ordinary families. Next week, I am going to show you the Amish method for keeping a root cellar at exactly 52 degrees year-round without a single watt of electricity, using a detail in the door frame that almost nobody alive still remembers. I will see you then. Before you close this video and head to the hardware store, I want to give you the rest of what Eli told me that afternoon, because the one-way door is only the loudest piece of a much larger system, and the system is what actually keeps a house empty of rats for half a century. The door is the eviction, the mesh is the lock, but there are 6 or 7 smaller details that the old farmers treated as ordinary common sense, and once you know them, you will start to see your own house differently, the way a carpenter sees a crooked porch or a stonemason sees a failing chimney. You will walk into your basement next Saturday morning with a flashlight and a notepad, and you will find things you have been walking past for 10 years. The first detail Eli mentioned, almost as an afterthought while we were standing by his woodpile, was the height of the hardware cloth patches above the ground. He said his father insisted on every patch extending at least 4 inches below the soil line, not flush, not an inch, but 4 full inches buried into the dirt and then bent outward at a 90-degree angle to form what the old-timers called an apron. A rat will dig. A rat will dig with a patience that would shame most men. But a rat will not dig down 4 inches, encounter metal, and then back up and dig outward another 6 or 8 inches to get around the apron. They give up. They go find an easier house. And there is always an easier house, because almost no house in America built after about 1950 has any kind of apron at all. The concrete just stops at the dirt, and the dirt is the rat's highway. The second detail was the gable vents. Eli walked me around to the east side of the barn and pointed up at a small triangular louver about 20 feet off the ground, and he said his grandfather had cut a piece of half-inch hardware cloth and tacked it behind that louver in 1928, and it had never been touched since. 96 years. The wood louver itself had been replaced twice, but the mesh behind it was the same mesh, slightly rusted, still intact, still doing the job. He told me that most modern gable vents come from the factory with a flimsy aluminum screen designed to keep out wasps, and a rat can chew through that screen in under 90 seconds. He timed one once with a stopwatch when he was a boy, on a vent his uncle had installed, and the rat was through in 83 seconds flat. 83 seconds between a sealed attic and an infested attic. That is the margin you are living on if you trust factory screen. The third detail, and this one surprised me because I had never heard it anywhere else, was about the dryer vent. Eli said that the dryer vent is the single most overlooked entry point in any house built after about 1970 because the little plastic flapper that comes standard is a joke. It is held shut by gravity and a spring so weak that a determined mouse can lift it with its nose, and a rat does not even need to try. He told me to throw the plastic flapper in the trash and replace it with a stainless steel louvered cover, the kind with 4 spring-loaded metal flaps that close with actual tension, and to back that up with a 1/4-inch hardware cloth cage on the inside of the duct, set back about 8 inches so it does not collect lint. The cost is about $11. The labor is 15 minutes, and it closes a hole that, according to a pest control trade journal from 1998, accounts for somewhere between 18 and 22% of all rodent entries in suburban homes. The 4th detail was the sill plate, and Eli got quiet when he talked about this one, because he said this is where most modern houses are simply doomed from the day they are built. The sill plate is the horizontal piece of lumber that sits on top of the foundation wall, and the framing of the entire house sits on top of it. In a house built before about 1940, the sill plate was bedded in a thick layer of mortar or lime putty, and any gap between the wood and the concrete was sealed tight by the mason as part of his trade. In a house built after about 1970, the sill plate is set on a thin foam gasket, sometimes a 1/4 inch thick, sometimes less, and over the decades that foam compresses, dries out, cracks, and falls away. What you are left with is a continuous horizontal slot, sometimes only the width of a pencil, sometimes wider, running all the way around the perimeter of your house at exactly the height a rat traveling along the foundation would naturally investigate. Eli told me his father went around the entire farmhouse in 1962 with a caulk gun loaded with a mixture of Portland cement and white glue, and he packed every visible gap in the sill plate from the outside, and then he covered the whole band with a strip of galvanized flashing nailed top and bottom. That flashing is still there. It has been painted 4 times, and not one rat has come through the sill in 62 years. The 5th detail was the chimney, and this is one most people get wrong even when they try to do it right. Eli said that a chimney cap from the home improvement store is usually fine for keeping out birds and squirrels, but the mesh on most of them is 3/4 inch or even 1 inch, and a juvenile rat will go through 1-inch mesh like it is not there. He insisted on 1/2-inch hardware cloth, doubled and welded or wired to a stainless steel frame that clamps to the flue tile with stainless bolts. He told me about a neighbor in 1973 who had a chimney cap from a national retailer installed by a roofing crew, and within 2 years he had a colony of about 40 rats living in the unused fireplace on the 2nd floor, accessing it by climbing the rough brick on the outside of the chimney and dropping straight down. 40 rats in a fireplace. The smell, Eli said, was something you could not describe to a person who had not stood in that room. The 6th detail was the plumbing penetrations, and this is the one I want you to pay the most attention to, because almost every house in America has this problem and almost nobody knows it. Every pipe that enters your house from below, every sewer line, every water main, every gas line passes through a hole in the foundation or the slab. That hole was drilled larger than the pipe because the plumber needed room to work and room for the pipe to flex. In a house built before about 1950, the plumber would pack that gap with oakum, which is tarred hemp fiber, and then pour molten lead over the top to seal it permanently. Lead and oakum. Try chewing through that. In a house built today, the plumber squirts a bead of expanding foam around the pipe and walks away. Expanding foam, a rat will chew through expanding foam the way you would chew through a marshmallow. They actually seem to enjoy it. Eli told me to take a flashlight and go around every single pipe penetration in my basement and crawl space, and anywhere I saw foam, to dig it out with a screwdriver, stuff the gap with stainless steel wool packed in tight with the back end of the screwdriver, and then cover the whole thing with a patch of hardware cloth held in place with a hose clamp around the pipe. Steel wool, hardware cloth, hose clamp. Total cost per penetration about $1.25. Total time about 3 minutes. And it closes a hole that the rats have been using since the day the house was built. Now, I want to address something directly, because I know some of you are sitting there thinking that this all sounds like a lot of work for a problem you could solve with a $15 bag of poison from the farm store. And I understand that thinking. I used to think that way myself. But let me tell you what Eli told me when I asked him the same question, because his answer changed the way I look at this entire industry. He said that poison does not solve a rat problem. Poison creates a rat problem you cannot see. Because what happens when you put poison in your walls is that the rats eat it, They go back to wherever they nest, which is usually somewhere deep inside the structure of your house, and they die there. And then they rot there. And the smell of a single dead rat in a wall cavity will make a bedroom uninhabitable for somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks, depending on the temperature and the humidity. And the flies that hatch from that carcass will fill your house in numbers you would not believe. Eli told me about a customer in 1986 who had a pest control company come out and put down bait blocks, and 3 weeks later the man called Eli because his wife refused to sleep in their own house anymore. Eli went over with a stud finder and a drywall saw, and he cut into the wall behind the headboard, and he pulled out the bodies of 9 rats. 9 in one cavity. The youngest one, he estimated, had died about 4 days earlier. The oldest, about 2.5 weeks. The wall framing had to be replaced. The insulation had to be replaced. The drywall had to be replaced. The total bill came to something like $4,000 in 1986 money, which is closer to $12,000 today. All to save $15 on a bag of poison instead of a roll of mesh. And there is a second problem with poison that almost nobody talks about, and Eli brought it up while we were having coffee at his kitchen table. He said that the modern anticoagulant rodenticides, the ones that have replaced the older warfarin compounds, are powerful enough that a single feeding can kill a rat over the course of about 5 to 7 days. But during those 5 to 7 days, the rat keeps moving. It gets weaker, it gets slower, it becomes easy prey, and the things that eat it. The barn owls, the red-tailed hawks, the foxes, the neighborhood cats, they all get a dose of the poison too. Eli said he had personally found 3 dead barn owls on his property in the late 1990s, all within about a mile of houses that had hired exterminators, and all 3 had the telltale signs of secondary poisoning: blood at the beak, blood at the talons, the body still warm. A barn owl, he reminded me, will eat somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 rodents per year. So when you kill one barn owl with secondary poisoning, you have just created a vacuum that will be filled by, conservatively, 1,500 more rodents over the next 12 months. The poison does not just fail to solve the problem, it actively makes the problem worse by killing the only things that were keeping it in check for free. This is why the one-way door matters so much, and why the hardware cloth matters even more. You are not killing anything, you are not poisoning anything. You are simply telling the rats, very firmly and very permanently, that this house is no longer available to them. And then you are letting nature do what nature has done for about 40 million years, which is to recycle those rats back into the food chain through the owls and the hawks and the foxes that were here long before your house was built and will be here long after it is gone. There is one more piece of this I want to give you, because I promised Eli I would, and he was very specific about it. He said that the single most important thing a homeowner can do, more important than the door, more important than the mesh, more important than any of the 6 details I just described, is to walk the perimeter of the house once every season, 4 times a year, with a notepad and a flashlight, and to look, just look. Look for fresh dirt at the foundation, which means digging. Look for smudge marks on the siding, which are the grease stains a rat leaves from the oils in its fur after dozens of trips along the same path. Look for droppings, which are dark and pointed at the ends and about the size of a grain of rice. Look for gnaw marks on the wood trim around basement windows, which will be light-colored where the weathered surface has been chewed away to reveal fresh wood underneath. He said most people walk around their own house maybe twice a year, if that, and they never actually look at the foundation, because the foundation is boring. It is just concrete and dirt and the bottom of the siding. But the foundation is where the war is being fought, every season, every night, and the side that is paying attention is the side that wins. Eli's father kept a notebook, a small leather-bound one that Eli still has on a shelf in his kitchen, and in that notebook are entries going back to 1934. Each entry is a date, a location on the house, and a 1 or 2 word description of what was found and what was done. April 12, 1938, northeast corner, fresh digging, patched with mesh and apron. June 3rd, 1941, dryer vent, mesh corroded, replaced. September 19th, 1956, sill plate west wall, gap behind shrub, packed and flashed. The entries go on for 90 years, in 3 different handwritings, his grandfather's, his father's, and his own. There are about 400 entries total. 400 small interventions across 9 decades. And the result of those 400 interventions is a house that has not had a rat inside its walls since before the Second World War. Compare that to what happens in a typical modern household. The homeowner notices a problem, the homeowner panics, the homeowner calls an exterminator. The exterminator shows up in a logo shirt with a clipboard, walks around for 10 minutes, and quotes a number somewhere between $300 and $1,200 for an initial treatment plus a quarterly contract at $60 to $90 a visit. The homeowner signs. The exterminator puts down bait stations, sprays some pyrethrin around the foundation, and leaves. The bait stations get refilled every 3 months. The contract auto-renews every year. Over the course of 20 years, that homeowner will spend somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000, and the rats will still be there because nothing was ever sealed. Nothing was ever excluded. The bait just keeps the population at a level the exterminator considers manageable, which is to say, a level that justifies the next quarterly visit. This is not a conspiracy exactly, it is just an industry that has discovered, like so many industries have discovered, that recurring revenue is more profitable than one-time solutions. A roll of hardware cloth in a wooden box is a one-time solution. A quarterly bait service is recurring revenue. The market, left to itself, will always optimize for recurring revenue, and the knowledge of one-time solutions will always be quietly allowed to fade because nobody has any financial reason to keep teaching it. The old farmers taught it because they had no money to pay anyone else, and because their fathers had taught it to them, and because the alternative was losing a barn full of grain to vermin in a single winter. The chain of teaching broke somewhere around 1960 when the first national pest control franchises started advertising on television and convinced an entire generation of new suburban homeowners that this was a job for professionals. It was never a job for professionals. It was always a job for the person who owned the house. And the tools have not changed in 200 years. Hardware cloth was invented in 1844 by a man named Charles Barnard in Connecticut, and the basic specification, half-inch galvanized woven wire, has not changed in any meaningful way since about 1860. Steel wool was patented in 1896. The wooden one-way door, in some form or another, goes back at least to the colonial period, and there are descriptions of similar devices in agricultural manuals from the 1700s in England and Holland. None of this is new. None of this is secret. It is just inconvenient for the people who would prefer that you not know it. So when you go out this weekend and you build your door, and you patch your foundation, and you seal your sill plate, and you replace your dryer vent cover, and you cap your chimney with proper half-inch mesh, you are not learning something cutting edge. You are remembering something that your great-grandfather would have considered as basic as knowing how to sharpen a knife or split a piece of firewood. You are picking up a piece of household knowledge that was set down sometime around the end of the Korean War and never picked back up by anyone in your family line because nobody ever needed to, because there was always a number to call and a check to write. Eli told me, when I was walking back to my truck that afternoon with the bundle of notes I had taken and a small piece of hardware cloth he had cut off a roll for me to take home as a sample, that the satisfaction of doing this work yourself is something he could not really describe to a person who had never done it. He said it is not just the money you save, although the money is real, somewhere around $240 a year in avoided pest control fees, which compounds to about $12,000 over a 30-year mortgage. It is not just the absence of poison in your house, although that matters too, especially if you have children or pets or a well that draws from a shallow aquifer. It is something deeper than that. It is the feeling of having taken responsibility for the structure you live in, of knowing exactly where every potential weakness is, of having put your own hands on every patch and every seal and every piece of mesh. He said that after you have done this work, you walk through your own house differently, you hear it differently at night. The little creaks and ticks that used to make you wonder are now just the sounds of wood and metal expanding and contracting, because you know with absolute certainty that nothing is moving inside the walls. You sleep differently. He said his father slept like a stone for 60 years, and he attributed at least part of that to the certainty that his house was sealed. I want to leave you with one last thing, because I think it matters. When Eli was about 12 years old, in the spring of 1961, he asked his father why they bothered doing all this work themselves when the neighbor down the road just paid a man from town to come out and handle it. And his father set down whatever he was doing. Eli remembers it was a piece of harness he was oiling, and he looked at Eli for a long moment and he said, "Son, a man who cannot keep the vermin out of his own walls cannot really say he owns the house. He is just renting it from the vermin and paying somebody else to negotiate the lease." Eli told me he has thought about that sentence every week of his life since, and he still thinks his father was exactly right. So go build the door, patch the holes, seal the sill, cap the chimney, walk the perimeter 4 times a year with a flashlight and a notebook, and write down what you find and write down what you did about it, and start a record that your own children or grandchildren can pick up someday and continue. You are not just fixing a rat problem. You are restarting a chain of knowledge that was broken about 3 generations ago in your family and in most families, and you are putting yourself back in the position your great-grandfather took for granted, which is the position of a person who actually owns and understands the building he sleeps in. Leave me a comment below and tell me what you found when you walked your foundation. Tell me whether it was the sill plate, or the dryer vent, or the gable, or one of the plumbing penetrations, or something I did not even mention that turned out to be the main highway into your walls. I want to build a map in the comments of this video of where the rats are actually getting in across thousands of houses in different parts of the country, because I think that map will be more useful than anything any pest control company has ever published, and I think it will belong to us. Subscribe if you want to see the root cellar video next week, because I am telling you, the door frame detail on that one is going to change how you think about food storage forever, and it costs almost nothing to build into an existing basement corner if you know the trick. I will see you then, and in the meantime, get to work.